Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good afternoon everyone, and very warm welcome to all of you in the last lecture of this series, which is called Contemporary Relevance of Gandhi. So as we had begun with this course titled Understanding Gandhi, then the kinds of things that we introduced thematically, today in this last lecture you will get to know. In a way it's a kind of summary, but at the same time it also throws light on some of the most significant areas which have emerged in present times. How is Gandhi likely to be relevant even in present context? So I have started with the global context because we should not think of Gandhi being relevant only for India or only in India, but rather worldwide the relevance of Gandhi is growing day by day. So what the thing that we need to take into consideration is that Gandhi is one of the most popular persons worldwide, and also one of the largest numbers of researches have been done upon Gandhi, and that too across disciplines. So it's not just social sciences, but say things like psychology and history. All these disciplines have been studying Gandhi, the way he led the movement, so what were the strategies that he used, etc. So we also get to see that his influence from the great leader like Martin Luther to Nelson Mandela to in present times even Barack Obama, who was the first black president of USA, he also had said that if he had a chance to meet somebody whom he would admire the most, then he named Gandhi. So that shows that Gandhi, although it's more than 70 years now that he is no more, but even today he is remembered widely and for numerous issues. So why do we need to remember Gandhi is also because the kinds of challenges that we are facing in present times, and those challenges range from, say, the growing number of conflicts among nations, between two nations or more than two nations, to climate change and poverty. Then we have come across the limits of economy, which is based on growth, and the capitalist model of development. So what has happened is that the kinds of thing which Gandhi was suggesting in his book Hindu Swaraj, that is, what are the limitations of modern civilization or why we need to look beyond modern civilization, is something which is so true even today when we have already entered into 21st century. And now that it's already 110 years of Hindu Swaraj, many of the things that he wrote in that book, they seem quite relevant even today. So what I have tried to do is that I have divided the lecture into 5 major themes in order to understand Gandhi's relevance in present context in India as well as worldwide. So the first section I have called Gandhi as a conscience keeper, as in how Gandhi can be so helpful in thinking about a good way of life, or you can say the ethical way of life. So that section I have named as Gandhi as conscience keeper. Then second section I have called Gandhian values in action, and this part I have further divided into 2 sections where I have talked about one, the emergence of peace studies as a discipline, and then second, the growing number of grassroots movements worldwide. And third section is called Gandhi as an early environmentalist. Fourth section I have named as Gandhi as a pacifist, and last as Gandhi as a communicator. So throughout this presentation you will get to know about these different themes around Gandhi, which also reflect the relevance of Gandhi in present times. So now coming to Gandhi as a conscience keeper, here I would like to talk about the 11 vows, or Ekadash Vrat as Gandhi called it. And so this is a sum total of, say, 11 principles for which he took from varied sources, say from Jainism to Buddhism to Bhagavad Gita, and also the Upanishads. So let's have a look at those 11 principles one by one. First and foremost is ahimsa, which is non-violence, which for Gandhi remains so central, and for him the non-violent way of life is the only way of life. So non-violence is to be practiced in day-to-day life, and obviously the manifestation of non-violence can be seen if two nations have to build a certain kind of relationship, then it should be based on non-violence. If a person has to deal with another person, then to that person has to follow non-violence. So we got to understand that non-violence as a value becomes an overarching principle for Gandhi in dealing with people, to dealing with say nature, etc. So ahimsa is first. Second is truth, and as we had discussed even in some of the previous lectures when we were talking about satyagrah, for Gandhi satyagrah is coming from satya. So truth is something again which remained another cardinal principle for Gandhi, and Gandhi said things like, say, truth is God, God is truth. So he equated truth with God. For him this is one of the manifest value by which one has to live one's life. The third principle is called asteya, or in English it is non-stealing. So what is non-stealing? For Gandhi, if one has not acquired something by the rightful means, then it will be a kind of stealing. So one has to have just the things which one has earned rightfully. So by right means, it's something which is very important for Gandhi. And similarly here I would also like to point out that means end debate. For Gandhi it is not just the end which is important, but means is also equally important. So whatever you acquire in your lifetime, it must be done through a peaceful way and through a rightful way. So that is third. Fourth is brahmacharya or celibacy, which again Gandhi stressed a lot upon, and also for becoming a satyagrahi, brahmacharya was one which Gandhi stressed upon quite a lot. And also during his life in ashram, brahmacharya was something which everyone was supposed to follow. So brahmacharya or celibacy, Gandhi felt that it will lead to it will lead to immense strength in human beings if they will have control upon their sexual desires. So brahmacharya was again something, although Gandhi has been criticized also for certain experiments that he did with his fellow women partners who were there in the ashrams, but then brahmacharya is something which Gandhi kept stressing upon over and again. Fifth principle is aparigrah or non-possession. So what is non-possession for Gandhi? Again it is similar to, it is closer to the meaning that we just discussed about non-stealing. Aparigrah is something which Gandhi says that one should not amass the wealth. So one should have only as much as one needs. So unnecessary hoarding of the things or unnecessary hoarding of the wealth, it's something which according to Gandhi will be problematic. And one can see that these principles of, say, non-possession and non-stealing, they are so close to the practice of Buddhism. Next is Sharir Shram, or which is also called the bread labor. So Gandhi said that each one must perform certain duties, means the manual labor is something which is essential, and without manual labor one should not take food. Means if somebody else is doing the things for you, it is not a good thing. So everybody must perform certain duties in the like the daily practice, the kind of thing which you need. For instance, the cooking or being involved in, say, agricultural works, because Gandhi felt that manual work is essential for a human being. Next is aswad or control over palate. Gandhi said that one should not overindulge oneself into good food, because when you are indulging yourself into good food, then your mind gets, in a way, you are always just thinking about having good food, and that is also a kind of distraction according to Gandhi. So control over palate, or why one must have, and in other words it is also about having the sattvic food, the food which will maintain the mental balance of a human being. So aswad is again, and as you can see that all these practices are about the kinds of changes which are necessary in one's life or the way one is living his day to day life. Coming to the next point, that is eighth, which is called Sarvatra Bhaya Varjan, that is fearlessness. So in all kinds of circumstances, Gandhi would say one should remain fearless. Now how will that fearlessness come? When you are correct, you will be fearless. One is afraid when one does something wrong. When you have committed something wrong, you feel that somebody else will raise a question over that. Or suppose when you lie, then you feel that, oh, my lie can be caught by somebody else. So that fearlessness will come from the practice of truth and non-violence. So in all circumstances, Gandhi will say that one has to remain correct, and that will keep one fearless. So this is the eighth out of his 11 vows. Ninth is the Sarvadharma Samatva, means equality of all religions. This is also called as Sarvadharma Samabhav, means one should pay equal respect to all religions. So this is also something which Gandhi remained committed to throughout his life. So although many a times he showed his solidarity for Hinduism much more, because he said that I have the knowledge of Hinduism little bit more than other religions because I was born in this and I have been brought up in this. So I know Hinduism more than I know Islam or I know Christianity, but that doesn't mean that I will consider Hinduism being better than Islam or Christianity. So equal respect for all the religions is something which will make the society a better place to live. The next, that is the 10th vow for Gandhi, is Swadeshi, which is use of locally made goods. So we had a previous lecture on Swadeshi and Sarvodaya, so there we have talked about it in great deal, but here I would just mention that for Gandhi, Swadeshi is something which is a spirit. Swadeshi as feeling that one has to live by that value, that you are dependent on only the things which are being produced locally. So that is one dimension, and further Swadeshi also has numerous dimensions. It has a national dimension, it has a social dimension, so one has to think about those later. The last or the 11th point is called Sparsh Bhavna, means remove untouchability. So Sparsh Bhavna is that all the human beings are same or equal, so we should not have any that purity pollution kind of thing in our mind, that by touching someone I will become polluted, or if I am of a high caste then I should not be touching the low caste people. So this 11th principle is again for Gandhi, which is about removal of untouchability. Sparsh Bhavna is also something about which Gandhi remained committed throughout his life. So these 11 principles are something which Gandhi has enlisted in order to live and practice a better life. And it's not that one fine day Gandhi acquired all these values as in he is going to practice them, but these were the values through which Gandhi himself lived his life. And even today, if we look at these values, many of them can actually act as, and that's why I have called this section as Gandhi as conscience keeper, that he can help us in living a more ethical life, or being honest to ourselves as well as those who are around us. So as I had mentioned earlier also, that these values are coming from Buddhism to Jainism to even Christianity and Bhagavad Gita. So Gandhi did not hesitate in accepting that his knowledge is coming from these different sources, and he remained committed to the cause of learning. And Gandhi felt that education is something which is a lifelong project, so we keep learning things throughout our lives. So be it these values or practicing these values, Gandhi remained so consistent about them. One of the concepts which is not part of these 11 vows, but something which Gandhi deeply believed in, is the concept which is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, that is the concept of Sthit Pragya. Sthit Pragya is a Sanskrit word, and its literal translation in English would be the person who has steady wisdom. That means a person who will remain the same in the situation of happiness as well as sorrow, means a person will not be carried away by these two situations, that certain things will make you so happy or suddenly you are so sad about the thing. So the situation should not keep influencing your state of being. So remaining this kind of a certain calm state of mind which Krishna was asking Arjun to attain. So Sthita Pragya Darshan is one section in Bhagavad Gita, and this concept of Sthita Pragya is something which Gandhi was very influenced by. So I think through all these 11 woes which Gandhi has mentioned, probably they can help a person in achieving this Sthita Pragya. So it was from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra that Gandhi took up 5 of the virtues which will help a person in attaining spiritual freedom, and we have already enlisted them in the 11, but which 5 are coming from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, so I tried to mention them. They are non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, chastity and greedlessness. So basically these are those parts of yam and niyam which are because Patanjali's Yoga Sutra has 8 different components beginning from yam, niyam, then asan, dhyan. So for Gandhi these values remain so significant, and prior to attaining what we call Sthit Pragya, or what even sometimes it's called nirvana, those things will come much later, but they have to begin with all these practices when one will not be driven by greed, or when one is not being violent in any circumstances. So for Gandhi these values are to be practiced in order to become a satyagrahi. So Gandhi would say that satyagrahi is someone who's living for the right cause, or one who will always stand for the just cause in the society. So a person living the life based on these principles, for Gandhi he would be the person who can also give leadership to others, because it's possible that not everyone is equally awakened, or if equally they all can practice these 11 values, but those who are the chosen ones, or those who have lived to live a difficult life like Gandhi, so then that's a difficult choice to make, because then you are committing yourself for the cause of society and you live by these values so that others can look at you and see that you are different from others. So these principles are time tested and they remain relevant to practice an ethical and moral life even today. So that's why I wanted to mention these 11 woes, and later I talked about Sthita Pragya, etc., so that we get to know how they can help us in understanding these values which are time tested and significant even today for us. Now coming to the second part, as I mentioned that I will be talking about 5 different issues. So coming to the second one, I will talk about now Gandhian values in action, and this part has 2 subparts. So the first subpart is emergence of peace studies as an area of study. So what has happened is that in last 3 to 4 decades now, peace studies has emerged as an area of study, that too worldwide, because there is a growing concern over peace and the need to have a discipline like peace studies and conflict resolution. Now this discipline is more of having an interdisciplinary orientation, because you cannot understand peace by only looking at philosophy or only looking at, say, political science. So you will have to have an interdisciplinary orientation to understand peace studies and conflict resolution. So in this particular discipline there is a separate you can say, or there is excessive stress on Gandhi's method of peaceful negotiation, because Gandhi's experiment in Satyagrah, when time to time he had conversations and he had debates with his opponents, and sometimes they reached somewhere in between solution or something on which even his opponents agreed with him. So that's why Gandhian way of peaceful negotiation for conflict resolution. It's so important even today, and it is used in different contexts. For example, the NGOs use it sometimes, or even when there is disputes within families, for instance if two brothers have fought. So it was in Hind Swaraj that let me just tell you one small anecdote, is that Gandhi says that when the law came as a practice, now even the fights which are taking place in the families, now two brothers are going to the court fighting for property. But were not the fights even earlier? People used to resolve them at a local level, but now what has happened is that there is an institutionalized way of resolving the conflicts. So this is something I just wanted to mention. And for example, nowadays when there is a fight between say two nations or among nations, then they go to United Nations. So what has happened is that now there is this proper national and international, there are numerous organizations which are looking at this issue of say conflict resolution. There is a renowned thinker named Johann Galtung, who is also considered as father of peace studies. He owes a great deal of inspiration from Gandhi. He says that I was deeply influenced by Gandhi as to how did he use the peaceful method to resolve the different kinds of conflicts that he came across in the society. The second issue that I have taken up in this Gandhian values in action is growing number of grassroots movement. Actually, I have here noted down only the movements from India. Maybe I could have taken up certain movements worldwide. Maybe I'll just mention some of them. So what has happened is that in present times there are numerous struggles which have come up where the local people are now fighting for their rights over natural resources, ranging from say Chipko Andolan, because Chipko Andolan started in say early 1970s when it's also called that people started hugging the trees, and that's why Chipko is to hug. So that was specially started by the women. So this is one of the early environmental movements in India, and all these movements, the examples that I have given, they all have remained committed to the cause of remaining non-violent and also following the peaceful methods of protest. So Chipko Andolan is one in which leadership was given by people like say Sundar Lal Bahuguna and Chandi Prasad Bhatt. And after Chipko also many other countries also had similar movements to save their forests, because already a great deal of deforestation had started in numerous countries, and because the trees were being logged for industrialization, etc. So the local people were trying to resist that kind of change. Second is the case of Narmada Bachao Andolan. So this one is again known worldwide as an anti-dam movement. This Sardar Sarovar dam was to be built on the river Narmada, and 3 states were to be affected by that, namely Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat and Maharashtra. Now these 3 states who were affected, and so this dam would have positively affected certain sections of the society and negatively affected. So what was happening is that numerous kinds of issues got involved. For example, what will happen to those who will be displaced from this place, how will the rehabilitation take place. All these issues cropped up, and that led to complexity over this debate, and it has also been seen as an anti-development movement, as in people struggling for their rights, etc. So Narmada Bachao Andolan is another. Some people consider it an environmental movement, others also look at it as more of an anti-development movement, etc. Third is the Beej Bachao Satyagrah, where people are fighting for saving their seeds. They want to have their rights over the seeds, because nowadays it is being said that the seeds should be controlled by the companies, that every year the farmers are supposed to buy their seeds, but the farmers have been protesting against that. So that's why now we have a Beej Bachao Satyagrah also. Another is the case of Niyamgiri struggle against Vedanta company. This is the case of Odisha, where the tribals could fight this their struggle against Vedanta company, and it has also become a case of, say, decentralization, because they opposed the move by Vedanta company for mining, because the people over there, the tribals, they said that the Niyamgiri mountains is actually for them, it is the mountain as God. So they consider Niyamgiri mountains as Niyam God. So they said that this kind of development model is not acceptable to them, because the company which has come is going to take away the minerals which is inside the mountains, but for them, they have been living there for generations. So here one can see that it is about the two world views, that the tribals are looking at the mountains as God, and the Vedanta company or any other multinational company looks at a mountain as merely the source of natural resource. So this is another case. Another one is of Plachimada struggle against Coca-Cola. This case is from Kerala, where people fought against Coca-Cola company when the company was taking up a huge amount of water, which led to depletion of groundwater over there, and they also polluted the water in that area. So then people started organizing themselves locally, and later they were also supported by the national and international civil society activists. So this struggle again is something which is the case of civil society activism, where people could fight against the company, and it led to the closure of the plant. Another case is of Jal Satyagraha in Madhya Pradesh, where people were fighting for lowering the water level in Omkareshwar Dam, and in this many of the people they kept standing in the river water, and they said that if the water level will not come down, they will prefer themselves to get drowned in water rather than coming out of the water. And due to excessive pressure of the local people, ultimately the government had to agree to lower down the water level in Omkareshwar Dam. So this is another case, and one of the latest case, which is the case is still going on, is that of Coal Satyagraha, where the tribals and non-tribals have come together to fight for their mining rights. So they have been demanding for the mining rights for themselves, and it is again an interesting case from Chhattisgarh, where in the Raigad district people have come together to fight for. So what has happened is that the local people have themselves named it as Coal Satyagraha, and on every 2nd October they assemble at one place, and then they just do the mining by themselves, and they are trying to challenge the authority of the state, or they are saying a big no to the multinational companies or even the Indian companies who come in those areas for mining. So all these cases, from Chipko to Coal Satyagraha, I have given you a great deal of examples to show the power of the people, as in why are they not ready to accept the role of state as an owner. Now here I would like to hark a bit upon the role of state. Is state a trustee or is state an owner? Because when it comes to these natural resources, the moment state considers itself the owner, then it may go on to do anything that it wishes to do. For example, I am not sure if you have heard of the case of Shivnath river in Madhya Pradesh, and now it is part of Chhattisgarh. So Shivnath river was privatized. Its stretch of say around 23 kilometers was given to a company named Radius Water Limited. So what happened is that then that company asked the fishermen not to do fishing over there. The washerman community were not allowed to wash clothes over there. The women were not supposed to take water from the river. So if that kind of thing happens, that a state goes on to give the rights to the private companies, then there is always a possibility that they may misuse, not only they will misuse the water or say other minerals, but they will also ask the local people not to use that, because then that ownership right is given to those companies by the state. So we got to understand that in a Gandhian framework, or even in a country like India, we think of the role of state being more of a trustee rather than owner, because the moment one is an owner, then even for misuse that person may go for. So, to have discussed two themes, namely Gandhi as conscience keeper and then Gandhian values in action, now we move on to the third section, where I am calling Gandhi as an early environmentalist. So, given the fact that in present times, when environmental concerns are at all time high, when from climate change to the pollution of rivers and the dying rivers all over the country, we are considering environment as one of the grave areas of concern. So, it is Ramchandra Guha who has called Gandhi as an early environmentalist in some of his writings, and after Guha, many other studies are also suggesting the same, or many other people are also calling Gandhi as an early environmentalist. For example, a professor called Professor T.N. Khoshu, who is an environmental scientist and also a faculty at TERI, that is Tata Energy Research Institute. He has written a book titled Mahatma Gandhi, an apostle of applied human ecology. So, if you look at this title of the text, Gandhi, an apostle of applied human ecology, it shows that, as I just discussed, that nowadays peace studies is one area which has emerged as an area of study. You get to see that now even human ecology is another field which is considering Gandhi of utmost importance. And why are we remembering Gandhi while talking about environment is because the kinds of values which he lived for, be it non-violence or peace, all these will be so helpful in the conservation of nature, or people should be minimizing their needs. Similarly, even say unity in diversity. So, those kinds of things are going to help the environment in a great way, and that is why, as we see that Gandhi himself lived such kind of a life which was based on simplicity, and if one lives a simple life, that will put very less pressure on the environmental cause. So, that is something Gandhi would say, that if one will live a minimalist life, it is likely to help the environment. So, that way one can think that Gandhi is an early environmentalist. Similarly, about the harmony between nature and human beings, how do we look at nature and human being? Are they two different things, or are they part of the same? And here we again go back to how modern civilization has created this divide, that nature and human beings as two separate beings. So, what has happened is that through science and through the scientific advancement, now human beings start controlling the nature. For example, if we consider rivers or mountains as the extension of, they are the manifestations of nature. So, we want to control them. You want to dam the rivers, you want to do the mining in the mountains. So, these are the ways of harming the nature. So, we can understand that certain kind of such things are necessary for the growing population, but also we can also have something called the alternative way of alternative economics, or what is now being called as ecological economics. That is another discipline which is emerging gradually. So, although Gandhi did not use the term environment in his lifetime, because at that time environment was not much of a concern as we think of it today, but certainly he was aware of the problems which excessive industrialization and urbanization is likely to lead to. And even in the book Hind Swaraj, we get to see such things which Gandhi had said, that if a small country like Britain ended up ruling over 80% of the world, what would happen if a country like India would aspire to become a colonial power. So that kind of thing. So colonialism has also kind of set the premise of what kind of environmental problems we get to see today in most of the third world countries, because this development centered way of thinking has led to a kind of obsession with things like dams, etc., which is problematic for environment. Similarly, with increasing urbanization, the kinds of modes of transport that we need, or the high level of technology which we need. So these all are the things that we got to reconsider if we want to think in Gandhian lines. Another practice which Gandhi stood for is that of vegetarianism. And again, even on vegetarianism, there is a lot of debate whether Gandhi was a vegetarian due to religious cause, or was it something that he followed out of choice. So, whatever be the way, but practicing vegetarianism is something which is good for the environment. So, we may consider it as that Gandhi was more of an environmentalist conscious person, and that's how he practiced vegetarianism. Now, coming to the next part of the article, where I have considered Gandhi as a pacifist. So, Gandhi as a pacifist can also be seen as an extension of his idea that the peace studies as a discipline, how has it emerged, but at the same time we can also see that using the peaceful ways of conflict resolution can be seen from people like, say, Martin Luther to Nelson Mandela, and also Johann Galtung. So let's just discuss a little bit more on each of them. Martin Luther was fighting against racism in the context of USA, and we must remember that although USA became an independent country way back in 1776, but racism was being practiced even till the middle of 20th century. So, and we all know that Obama became the first black president of USA so late. So, even though USA had a large percentage of black population, but still that country was practicing racism, and Martin Luther had said that he got a lot of inspiration from Gandhi, because Gandhi had fought against racism in the context of South Africa, and that helped Martin Luther in fighting a similar struggle in the context of USA. Similarly, the second leader who is known worldwide for this same issue, similar issue, that is racism, is Nelson Mandela. And we must remember Nelson Mandela for many other things also. For example, similar to Gandhi, even Mandela spent a great deal of his life in the jails. So Mandela's life in jail was as long as 27 years, which is quite a long time. And his book, Long Walk to Freedom, is about his experience, what gave him the courage. So Mandela has over and again said that he was so influenced by Gandhi. All through his life when he was in jail, he also kept thinking about Gandhi. From where did Gandhi get the courage? And that kind of courage he also got from this thinking about Gandhi. So sometimes what happens is that although Mandela didn't meet Gandhi in person, but he was influenced by Gandhi's thought and Gandhian philosophy. And Mandela not only fought apartheid in the context of South Africa, but later he also established a reconciliation committee through which he looked at the experience of the people, what kinds of suffering have they gone for. So this method of reconciliation is something Mandela is taking up from Gandhi, and he says that truth and reconciliation, these are the two ways of dealing with something which has already happened in the society, but we can go back and think about those things, how did they happen. Third point I have taken up is about Johann Galtung, and about him I already mentioned about how he is considered the father of peace studies, and he started an organization called PRIO, that is PRIO, Peace Research Institute Oslo. Oslo is a city in Norway, and this institute is supposed to be one of the best institutes which offers education on peace studies. And in present times, peace studies is something which is popular in, say, disciplines like even management to the non-governmental organizations. So from different disciplines, people are going to this peace studies program, and even the bureaucrats or say administrators to the politicians, they are going to learn why and how should we practice peace or the different dimensions of peace. Fourth example I have taken is about Aung San Suu Kyi or Suu Kyi, that's what she is called. She is a leader of Myanmar. Even Suu Kyi was in jail for a very long time. She was imprisoned by the military government of Myanmar, and now Aung San Suu Kyi is the head of Myanmar. Even she has said many a times that she was inspired by Gandhi so much, and I have not named Dalai Lama here, but even Dalai Lama is another peace practitioner who is so renowned worldwide. So what we get to see is that Gandhi as a pacifist, why am I considering him as a pacifist? Because peace and non-violence no more remain merely the values, but rather they are the values to be practiced, and that we get to see in Gandhi and later all those who got inspiration from Gandhi. And not only that, but there is also a rise of pacifist movement worldwide after the First World War itself, that is in 1920s itself. Pacifist movement started taking shape, and it got much more strengthened after the Second World War, because more you have the wars or more you have the conflicts in the society, that you start thinking about peace as an alternative. So pacifist movement in 1960s and 70s got the shape of, say, anti-nuclear movement, because when more and more countries were in that nuclear race that they want to become the nuclear countries, the opposite of that is something called the denuclearization also became a new voice. And so again the civil society activists have been raising their voice as to why we should not think of power in terms of becoming a nuclear power, but rather it should be people's power. Or for example, here you can also think of that each and every country is spending so much on its defense or acquiring arms, but in comparison to that, the money that we are spending in the social sector is a minuscule amount of money. So in the health or education you are spending so less. So that kind of disparity between these two causes that each country is thinking that the other country may attack upon us, and that's why you keep on hoarding arms, and that has created a kind of arms race. We all know about the example of like how during the Cold War the world was divided into two camps, and even when the Cold War has come to an end, nowadays we think that whether America is the sole superpower or whether we are moving towards a multipolar world. Either case, we are seeing that each and every country is so prone to acquiring arms, and thus on the other hand we also need to have something like a pacifist movement where somebody can keep reminding these countries that there is no end to this kind of arm race. Now coming to the next point, which I have called as the essence of Gandhian philosophy, and I have tried to again summarize the points why and how we need to think of Gandhian philosophy. So I have named 4S, which are namely, first is Swaraj, or sometimes also called as Swaraj, and we have already talked about the different dimensions of Swaraj, that we got to think of political Swaraj, economic Swaraj, social Swaraj, also the spiritual Swaraj, because these are the 4 dimensions of a human existence. So you need to have all these dimensions of freedom, then only one can feel oneself being free. Second is Swadeshi, that is self-reliance, and we have about this in the previous section also, that depending upon the locally produced goods it's something which we consider as Swadeshi. So buying the Indian products is one, and also the spirit of Swadeshi, that your language, your culture is something that you should give importance to. Third is Sarvodaya, or upliftment of all. So in Sarvodaya, you think of one and all being the part of the same. So you should not differentiate between the two, but rather the upliftment of all is possible only when we will take everyone together. So Sarvodaya was again the third component of Gandhian philosophy. And fourth, I have taken up Satyagraha, that is to stick to the truth. Satyagraha is also seen as a mechanism to resolve the crisis of different kinds which emerge in the society from time to time, and one can take up the vow of like why one needs to practice as a Satyagrahi. Other than these four, there are two more concepts which I have not listed here in this, but you should remember about the concepts of Antyodaya, means the poorest of the poor is also to be taken together in the path of development. And last is Daritra Narayan, means the one who is poor is actually one should see the face of God in the face of a poor. So even those two concepts were very close to Gandhi. Overall, one can say that his Swaraj and Satyagraha could be seen as twin concepts which are having universal significance. So Swaraj and Satyagraha should not be seen as the values which are significant only for India, but rather we should think that they have a universal significance and it can be tested any at any place. For example, Swaraj for Gandhi was mode of self recognition. One has to recognize oneself, and how will that happen? That will happen only through having a mastery over mind and passions. So spiritual freedom is something which for Gandhi remains so significant that one has to think of oneself being in charge of doing the right thing. Again, for Satyagraha, it is not merely about insistence on truth, but it is also an act which is performed with God as witness. So for Gandhi, God was not something who is sitting in the heaven, but Gandhi considered God as somebody who is omnipresent. We have to think as God who is right next to us. So whatever you are doing, whatever the cause that you choose for your life, you should give your 100% to that. And a Satyagraha cannot be done for the individual benefits. You have to have a social cause in mind. So these are the things which remind us that Gandhian philosophy was not relevant just for his own time, but it's relevant even today. Now I have talked about Gandhians after Gandhi, and in this I have named certain people from India and outside India. So to begin with India, we have people like we had Vinoba Bhave, who did the movements like Bhudan and Gramdan. Then second person is called J.C. Kumarappa, who has written a book called Economy of Permanence, and he was of the view that ecology and economics, these two need to go hand in hand with each other. Third is the D.R. Gadgil. D.R. Gadgil was an economist who also talked about Buddhist economics, and he said that Buddhist economics is quite close to the kind of thing which Gandhi insisted upon. Another person is J.B. Kriplani, who was an educationist, and he was also the husband of a renowned woman politician named Sucheta Kriplani. So this person, who was an educationist and socialist, he is also known for his criticism of Nehru and Indira Gandhi. One more person is called K.M. Munshi, who started One Mahotsav. It was an act of tree plantation, as in why we need to have more and more number of plants in the society. Then Baba Amte again experimented an ashram kind of thing, and his experiment is named as Anand Van. Now Baba Amte is no more, but his son and the daughter-in-law and even his grandsons, they are still running that Anand Van ashram, and it is considered as one of the living examples of Gandhian way of life. Another person is called Anna Hazare, and many of you must have heard of his anti-corruption movement. And later on, like Arvind Kejriwal who was also part of this struggle, he later on fragmented from that and then established his own party. One more, the other persons of the Chipko Andolan, who were Sundar Lal Bahuguna and Chandi Prasad Bhatt, they also were inspired by Gandhi a great deal, and they fought for restoration of the forests. Another example that I have taken up is that of Anupam Mishra, who was the head of Gandhi Peace Foundation, and he worked for the cause of water, and he tried to recollect the wisdom regarding water which was there among the people. So his book called Aaj Bhi Khare Hain Talab, it gives us the notion why we still need to have the traditional methods of conservation of water. So all these people who were partly Gandhians, and they were also like from their own lived experiences, they worked in different spheres of life, but they all remained committed to the social cause. Among the outside India, because I already talked about certain, when I was talking about Gandhi as a pacifist, then I talked about Martin Luther and Nelson Mandela. So here I will not talk about them again, but I will just mention about two other people, or say in fact three. Here I have named Dalai Lama, who is fighting for the freedom of Tibet for last 5 decades. Another person is called E.F. Schumacher, who wrote a book called Small is Beautiful, and he is said to have said a very famous line, think globally but act locally. So Schumacher also said that he was very inspired by Gandhi, and in this book Small is Beautiful, he has written a chapter called Buddhist Economics. So he was also drawing a parallel between Buddha and Gandhi. Another person is called Ivan Illich, who has written a book, De-Schooling Society. So this person is saying that why we need to forget certain things, why we should not just keep on acquiring knowledge, but rather sometimes we need to unlearn certain things. Similar thing was said even by Vinoba Bhave in Indian context. For example, he said, Agyan bhi gyan hai, means only having the knowledge from books is not enough. Sometimes you should understand, even a farmer or a potter is having a different kind of knowledge which you may not know. So we must be ready to learn from others, because everyone is having a knowledge of a different kind. Now coming to the last section of my presentation, where I am calling Gandhi as a communicator. I feel that Gandhi remained committed to the cause of communication throughout his life, and the communication not only with the loved ones but also along with your adversaries. Means there can be people who are not loving you, but still you should try to have a communication with them. Not only that, but Gandhi also felt that whatever influenced him, whatever he used to read, he kept sharing those things with others. For example, at the end of the book Hindu Swaraj, he has given a list of 20 books which people should read. So this possibility of dialogue is something which remains so central to Gandhi, and I have listed a few people and the groups of people with whom Gandhi tried to have a dialogue from time to time, and which is renowned. For example, with Ambedkar on the issue of caste, he had a discussion with Ambedkar, and throughout in towards 1930s, series of debates between Gandhi and Ambedkar seems to have in a way both these people evolved in their lives. Again with Tagore also, Gandhi had numerous rounds of debates and dialogues on issues like nationalism. These two people did not agree with each other, or say their views on culture, their views on poverty. So with Tagore also, Gandhi kept having conversation from time to time. Then with the British rulers, Gandhi kept having debates and dialogues with the British rulers to make them agree at times. So disagreement is fine, but we need to keep having conversation with each other. Then Gandhi was deeply committed to the cause of the masses, so he had dialogues with the common people. He used to do those door-to-door campaigns. He used to do those surveys. Nowadays, survey as a method has become so popular, but we must remember Gandhi was also doing a certain kind of survey. So, with farmers, workers, women, these are the different sections of the society through which Gandhi kept having conversation time to time. So, that's why I have considered Gandhi as a communicator. Now, coming to the last part, which I have considered as conclusion, I have listed a few points which we must remember, and it also summarizes why Gandhi is relevant even today. So, to begin with, his attack on modern civilization, and by modern civilization he meant a great deal of things, this fast pace of life, or our reliance upon medicine, or law as a discipline. These are the things that Gandhi was criticizing, and why we need to be cautious when we are using these things, be it modern medicine, be it use of law, etc. Like Gandhi was also quite suspectable about the role of parliament or the role of political parties. He felt that all these are always, in a way making people suspicious about each other. Then second, as we discussed in great deal about peace studies as a discipline has now emerged, because Gandhi's use of peace and non-violence, these are the things, and now it is a separate discipline. Next, I have talked about use of religion in politics. This is again another crucial point, because for Gandhi, religion and politics, they are not two separate domains, and the kinds of religion that Gandhi was using in politics was more about spiritualizing the politics rather than politicizing the religion, because these are two different things. Nowadays, in present times, we see more about the politicization of religion, but what Gandhi was doing was about spiritualizing the politics, that he considered God being omnipresent. So, whatever the act you are doing, you must remain committed to the right cause. Then his take on caste and untouchability. We had a separate lecture on this issue, and I would not stress much upon that, but we know about Gandhi Ambedkar debate on the issue of caste. Similarly, his views regarding women, Gandhi is given the credit for bringing the women into politics, or how women also started joining the Indian national movement, because here also I think, because Gandhi, the kinds of language which Gandhi was using, since he was a religious person, and usually the women are also religious, so they could relate themselves with Gandhi, and that's how women came into politics in large number. Next is use of khadi as a symbol. So for Gandhi, khadi was not merely a symbol or not merely a cloth, but it was also about challenging the imperialistic rule. Next is dignity of poverty. For Gandhi, being poor is not something one should feel ashamed of. So Gandhi gave a great deal of dignity to poverty, and in fact he chose himself to live like a poor person. So that was something, again, a lot can be learned from Gandhi. Similarly, respect for manual labor. Gandhi felt that be it a barber or a potter or a lawyer, all of them, all the works should be given equal importance. Next is the theory of trusteeship, that Gandhi believed in trusteeship, that those who are rich should consider themselves as the trustees of those who are having lesser things. So even in case of capitalists as well as in case of big farmers, Gandhi stressed upon this issue that those who are better off in the society should consider themselves as the trustees. And similarly, even for the state, Gandhi would say that state should act as a trustee rather than an owner. Coming to the last point, I feel that there is a need to practice Gandhian values to achieve a more equitable society. So what has happened is that we have considered Gandhi as somebody who is an ideal person, but probably the need of the hour is that we could take up certain values in our day-to-day lives and could practice those values. Probably that would make India a better society to live. Thank you.